a horror trilogy on Netflix that premiered over the summer. Well, I finally got the chance to see it now that it is Halloween time. Let's talk Fear Street. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my spoiler-free review for the Fear Street trilogy. It aired this summer over on Netflix. I finally got to sit down and watch these movies, and we're going to do them all here in one video. If you're new to Dan Reviews It, thank you for finding this video. Please consider subscribing down below there, or even clicking that notification bell to get all of my new TV and movie review notifications. And comment below, too. How did Fear Street grab you? I sort of, didn't think much of this. I was actually on vacation when the first one came out, and so I wasn't really thinking about what new movies are out there. And then once it hit October, I thought, well, I better check these Fear Street movies out. They were getting pretty good reviews, and I had heard from a few friends that they were very good. And so gave them a shot, and I think it makes sense to do them all in one video here because there is a big thread kind of throughout these films that we'll get into. But these were originally designed for theatrical release. I guess the plan was one every year for 3 years, but they were all filmed at the same time shortly before COVID. But like a lot of movies, of course, around the COVID season, they were snatched up instead by a streaming service, in this particular case, Netflix. And of course, Netflix's entire model is basically let's binge the content. So they decided to throw them up 1 week after the other. And so for 3 weeks straight, we got Fear Street. First was 1994, then Fear Street Part 2, 1978, and then Fear Street Part 3, 1666. And this goes back to the 90s in terms of making it into a film, but the books as well. So R.L. Stine is the author of the Fear Street books, and of course we know him from Goosebumps and some other sort of spooky things. This is certainly more adult than the Goosebumps films. But yeah, they were gonna make a movie out of this, I guess, in the late 90s, and that never really came together. But Lee Janiak directed all 3 of these movies, and Peter Chernin of Chernin Entertainment, was the one who basically greenlit these. And Chernin Entertainment from a lot of different things. It's got that sort of dangling C and E in the, for the title drop. The Heat with Melissa McCarthy was one of them. In fact, a lot of the Melissa McCarthy ones are on there. But anyway, when Fox folded into Disney, a bunch of stuff, sort of went down the tubes, and this was one of the projects that was sort of just hanging in the balance. So Netflix bought the rights, and the rest is history here. So basically, all of these movies take place in and around the Shady Side town, and it's basically the history of the town. In the very opening scene of Part 1, 1994, we see a mall employee that gets murdered, and then, sort of the murder mystery unfolds through that. But as we unfold that mystery, we also learn about some of the deeper, darker secrets of Shady Side. And so that delves us into some of the other entries in the series. It basically goes back to that 1666 with a bunch of witchcraft spells. And so that's why we're moving into that for the third part. We have to sort of do the history first. So in this first one, you have a bunch of people that honestly I don't really know. I've seen maybe 1 or 2 of these people in some other things, but Kiana Madeira, Olivia Scott Welsh, Benjamin Flores Jr., Julia Riekwald. I don't really know these people. But the one thread throughout these movies, and I don't think she appears till the end of the first movie, but then factors in very heavily into the second one and the third one as well. But Gillian Jacobs, who we know from Community and a lot of great voice work lately too for her, but she is sort of the thread throughout, because her character was part of the 1978 thing, and so we delve a little more into that. But so this first movie essentially is your typical high school horror movie. There's not really a ton that differentiates it between 100 other teen slashers and that kind of thing. Clearly the director and the writers and the creators of this have all sort of looked to Scream from Wes Craven as, the pinnacle of examples, which I would agree with. I think it's one of the best horror movies ever made. But its stamp is all over this movie. And for better or worse, there's some aspects about it that I think work in its favor. Certainly the more comedic elements work in this movie's favor and are funny. And you also have some of the rules of the road here. But it just comes off as rather generic overall in its tone. I didn't get a ton of scares from this, but it is a building block for the lore. The biggest issue actually I had with it is that it takes place supposedly in 1994, but a lot of the things surrounding it for continuity's sake are not based in 1994. A lot of the songs that are being listened to by the characters came out in 96, 97, and not just, songs on the soundtrack. That I can sort of forgive because it's like, whatever, it's just on the soundtrack for us to listen to. But the actual characters are listening to songs that didn't exist yet. And then another one that struck me immediately is that the one character is chatting on AOL Instant Messenger when we first meet them. And that did not premiere until I think 97 or maybe even 98. So we were a few years off of that. So it may be minor, I don't think it would probably bother the average moviegoer, but that is something, as a music fan, that is something that, like, I know years of music, and it's just so easy to get a different song. It's just alternative songs of the 90s. None of them are specific really to the scene or anything, but, if you wanted to do that, then have it take place in 1997 instead. Like, who cares? I mean, it's all a made up story. And okay, maybe the book took place in 94. The movie doesn't have to. So that is something, and it comes up right away. It's like in the first couple of scenes, he's on the instant messenger, and there's a song that the girl's listening to that didn't come out yet. And I'm like, right away, I'm like thrown by that. So yeah, for me, this one is the worst of the three, but let's move on, to part two, which is 1978. This is kind of like a summer camp story. And it is certainly hearkening back to, the original Friday the 13th. And another movie that sort of satirized this whole sort of theme was The Final Girls from, I think it was 2015. Great movie there with Adam Devine. This is not nearly as clever as that, but as a horror movie, I think it's pretty effective. So basically, this one takes place in Camp Nightwing. And again, I think we're still, though, around the same area of Shadyside. But essentially, there's a possessed counselor in this one, going on a murder spree. And, but this movie starts in 94 still. All three of the movies have 94 sort of as the cornerstone. And in the beginning of this, we really dive into the Gillian Jacobs character with the kids from, part one that had survived. And so she's sort of telling the tale. And as you get invested in the story, you almost forget that it's a story being told in 94, because it really is, that interesting and fun. And this comes off as less of a satire, I think, than the first one, and more of an homage to these movies of the late 70s, early 80s, these classic horror slashers. And I think it's very effective in that area. I definitely, had a few scares there. And one thing I liked about this series as a whole is I didn't notice a ton of jump scares. There's a few here and there. I mean, it's almost inevitable at this point. We'll get some. But for the most part, they really were focusing on the more, I don't know, realistic, I guess, horror elements, as in, if there was a slasher in your neighborhood, this is what might happen. Less so with the jump scares that I think are a bit too commonplace. So I really liked number two. I liked the motif of the camp. It was a lot of fun, a good setting. And as the story's unfolding and we're learning more about the characters, and then indeed the curse as well from way, way back, we're getting a little bit more involved. So I like that. And then this one, let me see. Again, most people that I really didn't recognize. Sadie Sink plays the younger version of the Gillian Jacobs character. But then you've also got Ryan Simpkins, McCabe Sly, Emily Rudd. I just don't know these people. But, they all did pretty good jobs. And I do think I'm all for, celebrities in movies, of course. But it is sort of nice when it is a group of people that you don't know on the screen because it makes it a little bit more authentic. So then finally we get to part 3, which is 1666. This is where we really go back in the history of this curse, and let's meet the witches, and we find, the origins of the Shadyside curse and who's doing it. And again here, we've got people I don't quite know. I'm not even sure of their names here because the problem is it's only about an hour in 1666 and then it flashes back to 94 for the final half. So this one's the most interesting of all 3, and I do think it's the best. I think these movies actually do get progressively better as we go. But the witch stuff is always intriguing. I think there's probably not enough movies that take a look at things like the Salem witch trials and all of that kind of stuff from back then. I find that subject matter utterly interesting because it's just insane that this is what they really did back then. And yeah, we all know about it, but what great fodder for a horror movie, and it works very, very, very well here. But I think a little goes a long way. I was completely satisfied with the 50 minutes or 60 minutes that we got in 1666. I didn't think they, took too much time with the story. I don't think they padded it at all. I think we got just the right amount in that area. And then boom, we're back in 94 for the last 40, 45 minutes, whatever, with those original characters. Gillian Jacobs is on board, and now we're going to finally put an end to this centuries-long curse. This is, I think, where the humor comes in. The first half of this movie isn't very funny because, of course, like I said, it's real. I mean, they really did this stuff back in the day. It's horrible and not funny, but what great, stuff for horror movies. But the humor that the franchise thus far had was sort of lost in that, which was fine, because then it goes guns a-blazing in the second half, and it goes all out with the comedy and the horror. Good dovetailing, and it reminded me a little bit, and I'm not sure if this is what they were going for. I kind of think it was, though, just from the aesthetic of the movies, but it seemed like a sort of Home Alone kind of homage, because they were sort of setting up these little traps inside the mall and, doing the different stuff with the gates and at one point, I'm not sure if it's a paint can, but something swings down, to hit the people. So I think it's a little bit purposeful that's a bit Home Alone-y, but it worked. I liked it a lot, and everybody was game for it. So overall, these movies all get positive grades from me, but certainly I think the first one is the weakest. I think it's the most generic of the 3, but it's also necessary as a stepping stone, to sort of set things up. I'm not sure if you could watch 3. You could certainly watch the first part of 3, but I'm not sure if you could watch all of 3 without seeing at least a little bit or knowing a little bit about what happened in number 1 and even number 2 a little bit about this curse. Maybe you would enjoy it, but 1 obviously is the only one I think that you could definitely watch as a standalone. 2, you could certainly watch the camp stuff as a standalone, but the bookends of it I don't think would make sense if you didn't see 1. And that's why this series is perfect for Netflix. If these were released year after year in a theater, you may get some drop off in attendance, and people that, or people coming because, I heard 1 and 2 were so great, I'm going to check out 3, and be a little bit confused. But with the Netflix model, I don't think anybody's really going to watch 3 before they watch 1 or 2. So I think it works perfectly in this particular sense, that you can and probably will watch it in a binge mentality from 1 through 3. So with that in mind, here are my grades. Fear Street, Part 1, 1994, going to give that a B minus. If it were a little bit better with some of the music and technology of the time that it's supposed to be in, I think I would have probably given it a B, but I'll leave it with that B minus. Part 2, that is going to get a B plus from me. Again, that could even maybe have been a B. 1 and 2 could be a B together, but no, I sort of liked 2 and the whole camp motif. And then 3, the best of all, I'm going to give Part 3, 1666, an A minus. And really the name, of course, is a misnomer because it's only half 1666. But since that's where the curse originated that they're extinguishing in 94, it does sort of make sense as well. But yeah, there you go. Certainly 3 to check out on your Halloween movie list. And I'm glad we finally got to do this review. I actually watched it about 2 weeks ago, and I got caught up in so many other reviews. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.